The world is not going to rearrange itself for your comfort, and it should not have to. If that is what you have been taught, I am so sorry. You have been misguided. Allow me to clarify things. The current atmosphere, as far as self-help and therapy goes, really tends to coddle people and make them feel like, and it's such a tricky topic because you walk a fine line. Because on one hand, yes, your feelings matter. Your experience is valid. It matters. At the same time, you cannot expect everyone to walk on eggshells like they're walking through a minefield of all of your different triggers and potential explosions and expect them to know where to navigate so as to not set any one of those things off. But how are we supposed to know? It's like a minefield. It's underground. It's not visible. We have no idea. How can you expect someone to know when you're going to get triggered? You can't. And I will explain why. Another aspect of this that I just want people to keep in their mind is that the expectation of other people to not trigger you is an expectation of them to manage your emotions for you so that you don't have to take any accountability or responsibility. In other words, it's supporting a victim mindset, okay? Victims blame other people, and victims expect other people to alleviate their suffering, change their situations, and fix their lives. So triggers are, by definition, emotional reactions that are tied to unresolved trauma or suppressed emotions. So they're acting as clues to inner wounds that you have, right? They're not evidence that other people in the present moment are wronging you. So they're like a fire alarm. They're alerting you that something inside needs attention, but they aren't the fire itself. So you're in an argument with someone, they say something that's really upsetting that you internalize as like a massive criticism. It just hits something in you and it sets you off. That same person could say the same thing. This is how you know like that it's a trigger and that it's irrational. It's illogical. It's 100% emotion based. Is because the same person could say the same exact thing to someone else, even in the same context, and the other person may not react at all. Like it may literally they may not even notice it. It might even not register as an insult or something hurtful. Your triggers are your responsibility. If you're going to place that onto someone else, you're going to resent them. It will contribute to codependency, and it will definitely lead to stagnation in your own personal growth. So we're going to talk about the nervous system a little bit. Triggers are deeply tied to your limbic system, which governs your emotions and your survival instincts. This is all very primal. It's like your lizard brain, whatever you want to call it. It has nothing to do with your rational thinking brain, your prefrontal cortex. The amygdala's role, the amygdala is part of your limbic system, and your amygdala has a role in perceiving threats. This is where our fear response comes from. Even if the threat is purely emotional or symbolic, okay? So it doesn't have a way to discern between the two. The prefrontal cortex, your rational thinking brain, shuts down during a triggered response. You do not have access to it, okay? This is why when you see people and like a switch flips and they go into like a rage fit, I mean, there is nothing you can say to a person. You cannot try to reason with them. You can't have a conversation. They have gone, I don't know, I'm getting chills because I'm getting full on chills. And I'm having these flashbacks to this person a person that I used to date. Anyways, side note about rage explosions. Now I'm distracted. Okay. So the prefrontal cortex, it shuts down, right? It shuts down completely. You can't talk to these people. They've gone completely offline. 100% emotional reaction, right? You've seen it. We've all seen it. Maybe we've all done it. But anyways, this doesn't allow you to reflect at all, right? So originally, triggers like originally as humans, evolutionarily, triggers served as survival tools. They alerted us to danger. So, for example, like a loud noise or a rustling in the woods, it might trigger a fight or flight response, right? So that you run away or you fight so that you survive, because that could signal a predator, right? You're in danger. But in the modern context, triggers are often tied to emotional wounds rather than physical threats. The nervous system, it cannot tell the difference, which is why critical comments from other people might feel as threatening to you as physical harm. In fact, more threatening than physical harm in many cases. Unresolved trauma wires your nervous system for hypervigilance. In other words, you are always paying attention and seeking out potential threats and danger. So this makes it really easy for the most minor stimuli to provoke major reactions. This is what we're talking about when we talk about nervous system dysregulation, because a constantly triggered state that's on the lookout for threats all the time is going to perceive a lot of things to be a threat, even when they're not, for one thing, but it leaves people stuck in survival mode, and you're unable to engage fully in life when you're in that state. And this actually even reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it starts with like your basic needs, food, shelter, whatever, all this stuff. Then there's like human connection. And then there's self-actualization is the very top. Like if you are not able to meet those basic base level needs, you never get to the place where your nervous system and your body feels safe enough to allow you to explore these higher realms of human potential. People who are constantly triggered and constantly hypervigilant and constantly perceiving everything to be an attack, those people are in a state of survival all the time, and they become emotionally stunted and even like psychologically stunted just in terms of their evolution. Triggers often arise when there's a clash between who we think we are, that's our conscious self-image, and unresolved parts of ourselves. In other words, our shadow. So Carl Jung talks about the shadow, which is the parts of ourselves that we suppress because they feel shameful or weak or unacceptable. So an example would just be someone who prides themselves on being very independent and self-sufficient. They may feel triggered when someone calls them needy because it challenges their own self-concept. And if you haven't done any work to really dig into any wounds that you have around being needy or anxiously attached or whatever the case is, then you have these unconscious triggers that are at risk of being activated. And if it's not something that you've ever even acknowledged or reflected on, you will blame the other person. You'll perceive them as the enemy and the abuser. And then because they're the cause of your pain or your anger or your frustration or you lashing out, you're going to expect that they do something to resolve it and to rectify it. They need to apologize. They need to make it better. They need to take back what they said. They need to act differently. They need to make sure they never do that again, say that again. But triggers are just like a flashlight. They illuminate your own shadows. Another example is if you get triggered by someone setting a boundary, that may reveal a part of you that struggles with rejection or control. Projection occurs when we are assigning our own unresolved feelings to someone else. And projection is a defense mechanism that is designed to protect your ego, but ultimately it keeps us stuck in denial because projection is just a blame game. That's all it is. If you feel insecure about your intelligence, let's say, you could perceive different comments from other people to be extremely condescending or insulting when they're not. It's your own insecurity about your intellect that's causing you to perceive other neutral comments and observations as a criticism or an insult. And then because you projected your own internal unresolved bullshit onto other people, now you're expecting them to manage your emotional response. that you created out of thin air. I know I've mentioned Bessel van der Kolk before. I'm sure you guys know his book, The Body Keeps the Score. But if you haven't read it, basically, I mean, it covers a lot of things, but triggers provoke somatic responses. Somatic meaning in the body, the soma, the body. So a trigger, notice that when you get triggered, you have physiological responses. Like your chest might get tight. You might get physically nauseous. You might start trembling. You might start shaking. Your lips might quiver when you try to talk. You might cry. You might get really hot. You might feel, I feel tingling in my head, in the top of my head, because the body is remembering the trauma that's being triggered, even if the conscious mind has suppressed it. Even if you don't remember consciously what the memory is, the body is remembering it. And this is why healing, it requires not just intellectually understanding, but also different somatic practices like deep breathing, simple practices that teach you how to start to control your breath because it regulates your nervous system in real time. And then other things like different forms of movement, grounding. You guys know all of the different ways to regulate your nervous system. There are so many tools, so many things. They are very important, not just going and talking to someone about your triggers. You have to learn how to take your body through these experiences of processing the emotions, because otherwise we just end up emotionally hijacked. And you see this with people so much where the amygdala is overriding the rational brain, and it leads to very impulsive and often destructive reactions where people lash out or they shut down. This is an example of someone that's far beyond their threshold for that has exceeded their window of tolerance, right? Like what their nervous system, the window in which they can basically exist without a huge emotional reaction, whether it's like highly activated or like a hypo activation into like a depressive state, shut down. The good news is that the brain's neural pathways are extremely plastic, malleable, and changeable. So if you can repeatedly respond, this is going to create new neural pathways, and they will weaken the trigger's power. And having intentional practices can rewire your brain over time. Now, I want to get back to just the fact that it's not anyone else's responsibility to tiptoe around you. Everyone has different triggers. I know I kind of touched on this, but if we all imagine trying to meet everyone else's triggers so as not to activate any of them, this is an unlivable existence. How can we possibly know what not to say, what not to do, what to say, what to do in order to avoid an irrational, emotional, subconscious, unconscious response from every person that we interact with? And it's different for every single person. And even just the tone that I use could be the factor that triggers it. Imagine I say something in one tone and it doesn't affect someone, and now a few days later, we're having a conversation, I say the same thing, but in a different tone, in a different context, boom, triggered. Imagine expecting every single person to be able to do that for you. No, you need to learn how to communicate. First of all, you need to learn how to manage yourself when you do get triggered, and then communicate what the trigger is, how you feel, why you feel that way, and what you need. You need to be able to have a conversation without losing your goddamn mind and blaming other people. The culture that we live in that has all these trigger warnings and everybody's fucking triggered about everything and avoiding being triggered. And there's all this censorship on social media and just media in general to make sure that we don't trigger people. Oh, we don't want to share that. It's like, people need to be able to manage themselves. And also, people need to lighten the fuck up. People take things so seriously and so personally. It's like, okay, I used to be vegan, for 10 years, right? And I was like a hardcore. I would preach about, I really believed that everybody should be vegan and it was the most amazing thing in the world, specifically being a fruitarian. Let's not get into that right now. But I never got pissed or offended by other people not being vegan or talking negatively about vegans. I didn't get defensive But I knew people who did. I mean, they would literally get so offended and pissed off by other people talking negatively or making fun of vegans. Like I would watch YouTube videos where other carnivores or let's say, or whatever, other people would make fun of vegans and I could laugh at it. It's hilarious. And I'm a vegan. I'm not anymore, but whatever. But I knew people who could not laugh at that, took it so seriously, were so upset. Okay, this is what I mean. You got a group of people, they're all vegan, they're presented with what ends up being a stimulus, let's say a video making fun of vegans, that's the stimulus, right? And then you have a wide array of different emotional responses. You have laughter, you have anger, frustration, rage, defensiveness, all these different things. Whoever's providing the stimulus, how can they, I mean, they're just showing up, okay? And it's not their responsibility to manage how everyone else is responding, right? It's like with this channel. I say things and then you either like what I say or you don't. And I don't care. And I want you to like what I'm saying. But if you don't, that's not my problem. It's not my responsibility. It's not my fault. Like it's no one's fault. And it just doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I'm going to share my opinions and thoughts. You can take it or leave it. But yeah, you see a lot of people in the comments getting real bent out of shape. Like I'm amazed at how triggered some people get that just to feel the need to even write comments. I don't know. Maybe when I was like 14, but now I just couldn't even imagine doing that. Watching a video that triggered me or upset me. First of all, I would just turn it off. Why do you even put yourself through that? Why would you even subject yourself to something that is just enraging you? It's like the people who are addicted to the news and the sensationalism. If it bleeds, it leads in the news, right? And so then people just sit and watch and they just like love to get their nervous system all activated and in like all the fear and the anger and the rage. And people do it on YouTube too. I'm like, wow. There was a comment that I read this morning that someone said, I don't know what they said. It was something about like, if I would die, I would kill myself if I had to listen to that voice for the rest of my life or something like about me. Seriously, you guys, it's actually some of the mean comments are some of the most hilarious. I have never laughed more since I started my YouTube channel because any of the mean comments, some of these people are funny as fuck, for real. They're hilarious. But yeah, so you just can't get worked up about it. People are going to say whatever they're going to say. People aren't going to like you. People are going to criticize you. People are going to judge you. Who the fuck cares, really? Okay, let's get back to this video. Okay, so avoiding your triggers, you don't want to like necessarily avoid them and avoid getting triggered. That's not even what you want. You want to be able to get triggered and manage it yourself and like process all of that energy, channel it, like learn how to channel it and move it without taking it out on other people and blaming other people. That's what's going to lead to genuine healing. Growth comes from going through periods of discomfort. Think about when you start a new type of exercise or a new anything, learning an instrument, learning a language. It's super uncomfortable at first. It feels so awkward. It might be painful, but that's how you grow. You confront discomfort. You don't escape it. So, and unfortunately, I feel like the people watching this video are going to be the people who already know what I'm saying and agree with what I'm saying, but they're dealing with people in their lives that get all bent out of shape and butthurt about everything, and they expect other people to walk on eggshells so they don't set them off. I wish those people would watch this video. I don't know. And then if you send it to them, they're not going to watch it, and they're going to think that that you think you're better than them and whatever. Oh my God. People are a lot. People are a lot, man. They are. But if there are any of these people watching this, view your triggers as a mirror that is reflecting the areas that you still need some growth. By the way, we all have these areas, okay? All of us. So if criticism from other people triggers you, that may reveal a need to build your own self-confidence. By the way, I have a video on self-confidence and self-esteem. Check it out. Or it may reveal that you need to address some childhood wounds that you have around validation. Either way, I think the goal with criticism, you got to get to a place where you can laugh when people criticize you. That's how you know. That's how you know that you have a solid sense of self and a solid relationship with yourself, and that you have true confidence. Not just the part, this surface level ego confidence that you present to the world. No, like deep internal confidence and belief in yourself and love for yourself, so that nothing that anybody says is really going to affect that self-image. It bounces right off. And instead you can even laugh, and you have enough self-awareness to even, this is next level. This is actually the next level. This is the high level shit. That you could even agree with them. Like you could even see where they're coming from and think it's hilarious, right? I can say, because I can run my fucking mouth. If you haven't noticed, like I can run it. And sometimes people can't get a word in. I just go on and on and on. I got a lot to say. I mean, so this person's saying I would kill myself if I had to listen to that voice for the rest of my life. That's funny. That's like really funny, right? I bet there are so many people that agree with this. I'm assuming it's a guy, that agree with that. And that's great, right? That's great. That clearly those would not be people that I would spend the rest of my life with. But that's okay. There are other people that might hear my voice and be like, oh my God, I would love to hear that voice every day for the rest of my life. Right? So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And definitely don't go changing yourself based on some bullshit that some other people say, because they're just not your people. Okay, so back to the steps to taking ownership, having awareness, pause. The biggest thing is pause. There is a moment in between a stimulus and a response. I was taught this once by a mentor, but there's the little space between the stimulus and the response. You feel like it's not there, and it feels like it goes from stimulus to reaction. The more that you can widen this space and expand it between the stimulus and the response, it could be a split second of awareness and ability to reflect before you respond. Game changer. And when you're reflecting, not saying that you're spending all the time in the moment doing this, but at some point when you're reflecting on your triggers, you're asking yourself, what is the root of this feeling? Is it tied to a past experience? Is it tied to the current reality? And how so? The other thing that you may need to do is to learn how to set boundaries, like we talked about the other day. I think it was my last video, to really protect yourself rather than trying to control how others behave. Boundaries are for you, right? So if you have solid boundaries, because if you have someone who's just constantly insulting you and criticizing you and triggering you, yes, on the one hand, it's not that person's responsibility to manage, but if you're in a relationship with a person like that, what are you doing? What are you doing? Get out of there. Have some respect for yourself. Because if you're constantly exposing yourself to that, that is showing a low level of self-respect and self-worth. Because you apparently, somewhere in your subconscious, you believe that that's what you deserve, or you wouldn't be putting up with it. So if someone is intentionally, or even unintentionally, but constantly triggering you, and they're that inconsiderate and unaware of what they're doing and how they're affecting you, then yeah, we need to reevaluate that one for sure. When you start to own these triggers, you're going to feel so much more empowered. So one last question. Is there one trigger that you can think of that you experience pretty often with, let's say, another person that you can face head on in the next few days? And how are you going to start to take ownership of it? What are you going to do? It's either going to have to do with you taking responsibility and changing the way that you're perceiving things and changing the way that you're projecting onto other people. It might have to do with you setting boundaries. It might have to do with you altering the relationship in some way. It might have to do with you having a conversation with that person. What are you going to do? Okay, because we cannot live like this anymore. We cannot live like this. Okay? This is not the way. This is not the way. We do not want to be triggered, constantly activated all the time. And if you've gotten to a place where that is your norm and you're just addicted to that state, then perhaps we have a little bit more work to do, but that's okay. We're going to get there. Don't worry. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am going to mention that I have never before put in my video description a link for my Calendly where you can book a one-on-one call with me. because it's just not something I promote. If people email me asking me, then we'll get into it and I'll book calls with them. They're one-on-one calls. I hesitate to even call them coaching calls because I don't have a coaching certification. I don't call myself a coach. They are one-on-one calls with me where we can talk about anything you want to talk about. And I will do my best to help you work through things. I'm going to start putting a link for that in the description so that if you want to book something, you can. Otherwise, maybe check out another one of my videos. I will share a couple of them here. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.